Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host JP John Poz from the two-man power trip. Of course, joining me is wrestling's financial genius himself, Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good. In between holidays this time of year, but keeping up with the news. Those that are following me on X, you might see sort of like a few days quiet, and then there's like 15 articles I'm sharing within 20 minutes. So that's a bit of an explanation for that, but trying to stay on top of everything.
And you are very on top of what's going on over there in Japan because New Japan has some big news coming out, right?
Yeah, so previously, as I understand it, um, there was different divisions still, even though Bushiroad owned New Japan, acquired Stardom. There's also, um, I believe, kickboxing that they've had before and so on. These were all like separate entities. So New Japan had announced at a meeting of New Japan Pro Wrestling's Board of Advisors on April 22nd, it was determined that NJPW will fully acquire all stakes in Bushiroad Fight Company, henceforth Bushiroad Fight, um, from parent company Bushiroad Inc. With this acquisition, Bushiroad will become a fully owned subsidiary of New Japan Pro Wrestling. So the goal is to improve operating efficiency and reduce redundancies within Bushiroad's sports unit. The stock transfers on June 28th. We said the company name already. Um, and so New Japan President Tanahashi said, our fans have seen a lot of crossover between New Japan and Stardom with our co-promoted events, as well as IWGP and Strong women's titles, but there is still a lot that can be done to strengthen connections between our companies behind the scenes, from arranging event schedules and building reservations, to make sure fans have time to take in big matches from both companies, to improving our promotional efforts and sponsor acquisitions. I'm excited the opportunity to further both New Japan and Stardom's appeal to a broader audience. This acquisition will speed up decision-making processes and improve our operating efficiency, freeing both companies up to further pro wrestling in the eyes and hearts of fans in Japan and worldwide. I look forward to fans' continued support of both organizations. And Okada, the Bushiroad Fight president and CEO, said, since Stardom joined Bushiroad in 2019, our cooperation with New Japan has seen Stardom matches in Tokyo Dome, and so on. Now, more than 4 years into the relationship, and with changes being undertaken in the management and operating structure of the company, there was a desire for a stronger connection between our offices, which is being put into place with this announcement. I hope that we can find new ways to show the world just how impressive Japanese wrestling can be. Chris Charlton, one of the English commentators who's been very involved with New Japan, I believe he wrote the Egg book, had tweeted, while this isn't a front of the house affecting situation, it's great news for fans indirectly. Operational efficiency equals no tripping over one another with big events on the same day, better, more effective cross promotion, and better ways for the whole family to experience pro wrestling. So it just makes sense. Now, welcoming a new member of our community, listeners to the group, a new member of our LinkedIn group, Justin Ray on LinkedIn. You can find him on LinkedIn at /Justin, Justin CKW. He wrote a really interesting article called The New Era of Strategic Alliances in Asian Pro Wrestling. So just a snippet about this part. Building on the foundations laid by regional cooperative organizations, New Japan's recent strategic maneuver highlights its commitment to not just participate in, but lead the wrestling market in Asia. The move consolidates is exemplified by the acquisition of all the assets of Stardom, marking a significant consolidation within Bushiroad's wrestling empire. It represents a deliberate strategy to streamline operations, unify branding efforts, and leverage synergies between men and women's wrestling. Let's see. By aligning Stardom's innovative approach to women's wrestling with New Japan's established global presence and logistical prowess, Bushiroad is setting the stage to accelerate growth and increase market penetration. So that's that on the acquisition side. Talking about, especially focused on, where our area focuses generally on the U.S. side. So looking ahead to their show in Ontario, California. They've moved over 2,000 tickets. It's currently set up for a little bit over 3,000. It's a 10,000 seat arena. So we'll see how that moves along. We're not too far out at this point, about 2 weeks as we record that. Moxley had defended his belt against Hobbs, so New Japan on Dynamite, so that, I guess, gives additional exposure to the brand, and having Moxley, of course, as a regular, just connects everything together. I'm assuming Moxley kept the belt. I didn't follow that result, but I'm assuming I would have heard.
Yep.
We know about the Forbidden Door upcoming in Long Island on June 30th. More of a AEW thing than New Japan, but like we've talked about, we've heard different things, like in the past that AEW had licensed the ability to use New Japan's name and talent. This time we had heard that New Japan didn't want to pay for Arthur Ashe Stadium or pay for half the rent there, so it moved out to Long Island. So not exactly clear, but early on, I believe this was taken the day that regular tickets went on sale. 5,440 tickets were distributed with a current setup of 7,300. I believe it's about an 18,000 seat venue. And I don't believe that the Capital Collision tickets are yet on sale for August in DC at their regular venue that they use, the Entertainment and Sports Arena, a venue that AEW has used as well. I think, like I've mentioned, I think their rhythm in the US, based on where they are right now in terms of live events, is their best way of doing things. Have a show in Northern California, have a show in Southern California, have a show, you do the Forbidden Door, maybe one or two other shows, depending, and you have, hopefully it's profitable and you make some money rather than like trying to establish a whole nother brand and just tour regularly. Here, keep it special.
Also, it seems like they have a lot more synergy with AEW, that the IWGP title is being defended on television. So it seems like not only are they kind of cleaning things up with Bushiroad and Stardom, it seems like AEW and them have even more synergy now.
Yeah, I think it plays out best with the Forbidden Door. That seems like the most profitable way to go. With television exposure, you sort of have to be careful. Like sometimes the uniqueness, especially for like a Japanese brand, maybe less so because of media just being so accessible now through a variety of streaming platforms and YouTube and so on, that it's less mysterious. But, late 80s, early 90s, even to the late 90s, there was like a certain mystique. Oh, this is a Japanese promotion, Japanese card. And it was like sort of a very unique feeling to it. When you not only have your own show weekly, but you have AEW, and AEW, in theory, although Ring of Honor used to position the title, I would argue, like higher when it was owned by Sinclair, but AEW, in theory, would have the New Japan title sort of like positioned lower. Some people were complaining about Hobbs getting a title shot. That it could sort of like take a little bit off the mystique. So you have to be careful of that balance of exposure and mystique.
What about the NWA? What's going on in NWA land right now, especially with Billy?
Yeah, so John, finally, I know you've been very patient. You're
Yes.
probably get to see Billy Corgan's wedding on this reality on this reality show. Nacelle Company unscripted series Billy Corgan's Adventures in Carneyland sets a premiere date. Directed by Volk Weiss and Ian Romaine, the series pulls back the curtain on how the legendary frontman of alternative rock band The Smashing Pumpkins takes on the world. When he isn't churning out albums and touring the world with his band, Corgan works as a wrestling promoter through his storied NWA, which he intends to restore to its former glory. As if being a rock star navigating the demanding politics of running both a band and a group of eccentric wrestlers isn't tricky enough, he's also a father of two, and he's planning a wedding to his longtime partner, Chloe Mendel. Can he possibly keep all these balls in the air? Volk Weiss and Romaine exec produced the series. I don't think we need to know all the producers right now, no disrespect to them. Grammy winner and lifelong wrestling aficionado, Corgan spanned the Pumpkins, sold over 30 million records. One of the oldest and most prestigious wrestling brands worldwide, NWA was acquired by Corgan in 2017 with the vision of reinvention for the modern era. Rebuilding the historic NWA brand has been both an honor and challenge, and this show opens the door wide, so to speak, to reveal the glory and the grit needed to thrive in a winner-takes-all sport. This article is from Deadline. It's not always pretty, but I'm proud to see what we've accomplished thus far. So, all of this is to say that this is just on the CW app. For a long time, we'd been figuring out maybe they'll do the reality show. It would be more appealing on the actual CW, but it's on the app as well.
When you look at that, is that the most intriguing thing about the NWA? Is this reality show? Because I know people that are interested in this. I know I was, and I want to see the wedding and Billy Corgan. But is that like the most interesting thing? Because he obviously is technically their biggest star, their biggest name. He's a Grammy winner, Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, I think when you're on an app like the CW, which isn't, I would imagine, isn't that popular compared to some of the others, certainly like in Netflix, obviously, which is a different type of platform, but similar idea. This type of thing seemed like it would be better positioned to be on the actual CW. Like you get casually, oh yeah, I've heard of Billy Corgan. I'm into pop stuff. Oh, he's getting married. I'm curious about that. Oh, they have wrestling. I've watched wrestling before, that sort of thing. So I don't know. It is what it is. I think that at some point, and that's probably why there's some confusion, I think that probably there was the intention that this would be on the actual CW. Like you have all these known producers and they're working on something that's going to be on the CW app. Like how much could they possibly be paying for it? Maybe they are paying good rates, but it doesn't make sense to me.
What else are they doing? Because I know they got shows coming up, right? They're going back to the territories.
Yeah, I'm on the positive side, I really like how they're promoting this back to the territories thing. It seems a little bit early, right? Because some of these promotions have been around a while and aren't even necessarily their official territories like World League Wrestling. But some of them are some of their newer territories. And it seems a little bit early to be like bringing them all together, sort of in a rivalry, but I like the idea. And I especially like the idea that they're doing it at a high school, but they're actually embracing that fact. They're not hiding that fact. It's like, we're old school. We tape our shows in a high school, which I thought was really cool. So NWA Power presents Back to the Territories June 1st in Knoxville. It's an NWA signature live event. A rare opportunity to see your favorite stars from every NWA territory all under one roof. The territories on June 1 at Knoxville's Carnes High School. The NWA Signature Live event gathers stars from all the Exodus Pro, NWA Chicago, NWA Southeast, Joe Kazan, Fight the World, Crossfire Wrestling, and World League. It is certain to be an unforgettable evening of pro wrestling action. Carnes High School is located at 20. We don't need to give the address, but in Knoxville. Tickets are $20 ringside and $10 for general admission. Student tickets are only $7. And then what I really like about it is that we're going to know how much tickets were sold to the dollar because it's on a fundraising platform. Give back. I grabbed the screenshot. $850 had been raised. So, looking at some other events, Joe Kazana Promotions, Harriman Heat 2, April 26th in Harriman, Tennessee. Joe Kazana Promotions is really old school. I don't think you can buy tickets online, no digital tickets at the door, or there's some places around the area where you can buy tickets. May 3rd, Highland Park in Illinois, NWA Chicago, which is directly a Billy Corgan promotion. Quietly, because this used to get a lot more attention, NWA's Crockett Club 2024 is happening May 18th in Forney, Texas, and August 31st at the ECW Arena, or 2300 Arena, NWA 76, and then all the way in December back to Dothan, Alabama. I like that they kept the momentum going of Dothan as they did well there last time and announced a show ahead of time, well ahead of time, which I think is a smart thing in terms of planning.
Now, as far as GCW is concerned, Brett, our longtime close personal friend, dropped a little bit of a shocker to me, just the last word in his tweet. Am I crazy on that, or was that kind of a shocker?
Yeah, you never know where GCW will go. I don't. Nothing necessarily surprises me, having gone, of course, to Japan and I'll say all over the world at this point, but to Europe and different places like that. But when Brett is looking for connections in different states, the assumption would be that they're looking to run there. So any GCW fans in and around Montana, Utah, or Hawaii. So that would be really interesting and not surprising if they get out there. So that's something to watch. But Hawaii, it's not run as far as I'm aware too often regularly by promotions. It used to be, I mean, they had, of course, we know from Polynesian Pro. If you didn't know, then you know from Young Rock at this point. But for some of the other worldwide promotions, it would be like a stopover. Like if you were in California and you're going to Japan or vice versa, like, okay, here's an opportunity. We'll run like one or two big shows and like stop in there. They released sort of a graphic of their upcoming schedule, most of which we covered, and Brett had tweeted out with that, like, we're not done yet, but just sort of reframing here. So starting into the future. So Tampa, May 3rd, Egypt Shrine Center. Those ticket sales were a little bit slow from what I saw. Jersey City, May 5th. That's a JCW show. May 18th in Philly at Harrah's Philadelphia, which we talked about last week. May 25th, back to Thalia or Talia Hall. I really have to figure out the correct pronunciation. But that was even covered the last time they were there by one of the Polestar or one of the industry trades where it had the actual dollar figure for that show. I think it was $25,000 in ticket sales. Then the following day, May 26th in Columbus, back to Valleydale Ballroom. June 1st and 2nd, Atlantic City at the Showboat. Not to start rumors here, John, but I received a message from a connection not affiliated with GCW who had heard that the Showboat might be under different ownership soon. And they were kind of hinting as to why GCW was running Asbury Park in August, sort of as being the reason they think that June 1st and 2nd is going to be the last shows at the Showboat. No one run wild with that. That's, this is basically, it's somebody who's very credible, who had heard from someone that works for the Showboat or an affiliate, but I haven't verified anything like that. But it would be an interesting story just because, especially when the Showboat was in the Carousel Room, beautiful venue, it really helped to bring attention to them at the space that they were in. Now they've been in like a converted bus depot. But interesting to see if they'll be continuing there. Maybe they will. So we'll have to see. Time will tell, or we'll get a news update at some point. June 14th in Denver at Jefferson County Fairgrounds. June 15th back to LA. So there's been 7 sellouts there. So let's see if this is the 8th. June 15th. June 16th. Actually, this is a triple shot, which is really interesting. June 14th, Denver. June 15th, Los Angeles, and June 16th, Phoenix. So I'm not aware of too many triple shots outside of like Collective Weekend or something like that. June 28th in Houston at the Premier Arena. June 29th back to Gillies in Dallas. July 5th in Toronto at the Opera House. I think last time they had split that show with the Montreal promoter, but now this one looks like going on their own. July 19th in St. Louis, or at the St. Louis Market at least, in Pop's Nightclub, which we've talked about. Back to Indianapolis, which has been a while, July 20th at the Marriott East. August 2nd in Cleveland at Temple Live. August 4th at Asbury Park at the House of Independence. And smartly, they have LA back on the calendar. So when it's working for you, you don't want to, you want to be careful, not to burn out a market. I think that was one of the issues, in my opinion, with something like Atlantic City, where it started slowing down. And LA was showing that for a while too, but now that they have their momentum back, so that might end up being the 9th sellout. So 8 and 9 are on the board potentially.
Now, changing gears, what is going on with TNA Wrestling?
So TNA announced a show at the Verdun Auditorium in Montreal, or in the greater Quebec market, on July 20th. So 3 months in advance. You have PCO on the roster. John, you know me already. Like, I've been to Montreal. I've been to see GSP, even like in one of his early fights in MMA. Like, if you have a native Quebecois, a French Canadian, and you're giving that person a shot at something meaningful, and the promotion has some significance, like, you could do really, really well in fight sports in Montreal, whether it's boxing, MMA, pro wrestling. I mean, we saw with PCO, what was it, 30 years at this point, right? Him against Jacques Rougeau. Really, Jacques Rougeau drew that house, but at the Forum. But I'm not sure how PCO is positioned at the moment with TNA, if it would make sense and so on for him to get a title shot. But like, they could really, I think they could do really well here in a historic 4,000 seat venue. And really, that's the venue that I'm not sure how great it is for television tapings, but I guess it'll be viable for TNA. But that AEW should run. Why run like the biggest, I think it's called the Molson Center still, 20,000 seat building, and you did like 2 nights, right? What was it, like 3,000 to 5,000 people max?
Right. You got to run the smart buildings, right? You don't want to run those big buildings and fill them up to a quarter. I mean, it's just not viable or smart to do that.
Yeah, and everyone's been, of course, telling AEW as much as possible at the moment, but it hasn't seemed like a major shift there. But in terms of their upcoming schedule announced already, so May 3rd and 4th, they're in Albany. So at the Washington Avenue Armory, a very small setup for reserve tickets and then a GA section. So still, even in this small setup, third row, you could get combined tickets together. In the second row, they're individuals tickets. At least for the more appealing night, I guess, the Under Siege compared to the tapings. Newport, Kentucky on May 18th and 19th. Cicero Stadium, again, one of my favorite venues to see on television, June 14th and 15th. And then the aforementioned Montreal shows, Slammiversary, and a taping on July 20th and 21st.
Now, as far as MLW is concerned, they've got a little good thing going here with New Japan, a little bit of Aztec Lucha stuff going on, CMLL stuff going on. What's the latest with MLW?
Yeah, I guess it's easy with so much wrestling news to forget that MLW has this continued alliance with New Japan and CMLL, and that has continued to stand up. I'm not sure if there's been any variations since AEW sort of has that agreement. The only part that doesn't connect is AEW is not working with MLW. That I'm aware in any capacity, but they're able to draw from a variety of things. So Okamura and Kojima will battle the second Gear crew on May 11th in Chicago. I like, I'm a big fan of like classic wrestlers and so on. And Kojima, he was the first MLW champion. I actually saw him at the Manhattan Center when they had a show 20 years ago. But just looking at this graphic, John, I don't know. It seems like a little, I don't mean disrespect to talent, but like, it seems like a little bit embarrassing. Kind of like they just seem so old. Like, it's sort of like, okay, we're getting New Japan talent and this is who we're getting. It just seems like, I don't know, kind of like secondary to like AEW efforts, which kind of makes sense. Maybe that's my own perception. Um, but this Azteca Lucha show on May 11th, you look at the ticket map, all the reserve tickets are gone, several hundred seats. And then you have the general admission available. The Battle Riot 6, Atlanta, Georgia. Interestingly, they have it listed on the website, but they don't link to the Ticketmaster page. A very small setup in terms of reserve tickets. Just like the first 3 rows sort of the lower bowl, and then the rest of the lower bowl, and then the second part is all GA. So of the reserve tickets, just one available and two resale tickets. So hard to tell how it's doing generally. The Blood and Thunder show in Florida on July 12th, so plenty of time. They have most of the tickets still remain. Basically, the front row outside of 2 individual tickets are sold out. And MLW tickets, as we're recording this, just went on sale for August 29th in New York City at the Melrose Ballroom. I got February 29th in the headline. I don't, anyone can make that mistake. I've sent emails where I made that mistake. We've all done it, but I was just like February, and then I opened it up and I said August 29th. So kind of like we've talked about, it's a good thing. I think the only promotion that doesn't know what it is right now in terms of fit and like fit to market is probably AEW. MLW booking the right size venues and sort of churning along. Doesn't seem like they're going crazy with trying to spend all the legal fees, but they're moving along. Talent comes in, talent goes out still, but I think they have their thing. PW Insider was reporting a week or two ago that BN Sports was very happy with the specials that they're co-running with YouTube. BN Sports continues, their cable footprint continues to be lower, but as our friend Gavin Bridge, hashtag iRuleTV, or on X at iRuleTV, had reported that BN Sports is one of the most distributed fast channels. So I'd have to check how MLW's exposure is on the fast side of things for them, but that's another potential avenue.
What is going on in other places? Because it looks like WXW, which we thought was possibly gone due to Alpha Anawai Sr. and his back injury and maybe, his advanced age, maybe he just wants to get out of business. It's not done yet. What's going on? The Battlefield promotion, if you will. What is going on with Alpha Jr. and the Battlefield Pro?
So Alpha Anoa'i Jr. had started Battlefield in Pennsylvania, I believe a few years ago. We were probably covering it as the news would come out, and had a running shows, but also a training school in the Catskills and that sort of area too. But now he's going to be the owner of WXW, so get those intellectual rights. I don't know what needs to occur between father and son to acquire those, but he's the owner, and they'll have a show on local cable TV in Pennsylvania, kind of the way it should be. When you think about like the wrestling of the landscape of the pro wrestling world as it's been for many years. I know WXW had been in Florida for a while, but when you think about it, Pennsylvania, WXW, Anoa'i family, like it just seems right. Other news, Coastal Championship Wrestling announced a sellout, 800 plus people in their venue recently.
Also, just wanted to throw this out there before we kind of mention some classic venues and kind of go in that direction. With AEW recently, I don't know like what you thought of it, but what have you been thinking of AEW, just the TV product and creative? Because I know Tony Khan getting beat up and the neck brace has been a big point of discussion. I feel like he turned that super negative, which is arguably some of the worst acting, selling. I mean, anything you want to say, it was bad. It was bad. I know Dixie Carter did it. I know Bischoff did it. I know Vince did it. So maybe he felt like he wanted to be a character and do it. But it did seem like the end game was smart. Like he could sell it on the draft because they're going to show him in the war room with his dad, and he's going to wear the neck brace. But what did you think about AEW Tony Khan and the neck brace?
So you have to know that nearly anyone that gets into pro wrestling, especially if they were a fan, one day they'd want to be on television or be part of the act. No matter who it was, I'm sure I would also if I was involved in the business. It's just a matter of when and how. It took,
Right.
Vince McMahon was, of course, in front of the camera, but it took him a while to reach the wrestler side, or at least the angle side of things. So you knew it was bound to happen. The way that it was done, I think Tony knew that, it wouldn't look great when he took the move, but like you sort of have to have that expectation or understanding. We even saw with like Linda McMahon and Donald Trump taking the stunner that, it would look bad. But it's sort of like, it's something fun to it. Chris Zellner had tweeted out that ESPN didn't show Jaguars War Room, so they didn't get coverage in that way. But obviously, like through social media and so on, that they're getting a ton of coverage. So I think it's a win. You just don't want to it's a bit of hot shotting, but you don't want to hot shot it to death, where then Shahid Khan gets pulled into the ring and they shave his distinguished mustache, or something like that. And then there's maybe Tony betrays Shahid, and one of them was really a Jungle Boy from the beginning, and factions, Khan black and white, Khan red and black, or whatever. You don't want to hot shot that to death, but once in a while, it's pro wrestling, it's fun. They needed a little something, and Jungle Boy, I know I'm using his old moniker, but he's coming in with some intrigue and some momentum. So it's sort of a smart way to do things, and it also signals that we were believing that Khan was really mad at him for CM Punk, and maybe he was, but now he used his rub or whatever it is. You could only do this once for effect. And he gave it to Jack Perry, right? So I think overall a win. I don't think it'll turn off AEW fans, and it's getting other people to talk about it. Of course, that people are going to bash it because it's AEW, to a degree. So there's that factions and feel. But I think overall, it was worthwhile a win. What do you think?
I think it was good. At first, the angle was, to me, I did not like it. It did not come off good. First of all, the audio, I don't know if you had this issue, but I had an audio issue the whole show. So I could hardly hear the promos. Everything was echoing. I could the announcer sounded like they were in a tunnel. So just the show, arguably, and people were saying to me that they agreed with me. I said it was their worst show ever. One of the worst rating shows, but one of the worst shows because the production value was really, really bad. I mean, it was just to the point where everybody was mentioning it. I can't hear. Serena Deeb cut a promo in front of the camera with no mic. I mean, it was just production value. They got to clean stuff like that. Within 5 minutes, you got to clean that up. It went on to the end of the show. So that was really bad in that aspect. But as far as what he did with it, he created some buzz because everybody online was like, "What? He got beat up?" And they were almost a little bit of comedy, but to the point where I got to see this. People were saying they got to see this. They want to see him beat up. Oh, his dad showed up. Oh, this is so people were interested. He turned a negative into a positive in that way, just because. I mean, you take a shot to the stomach, you sell it. You don't fall down and pretend you're dead. I mean, the selling. Somebody's got to tell them the psychology of the selling the move. That was bad, but what he did with it was good because you're in the war room, and the NFL Network, which I watch, which I think most people watch for the draft because I think they have the best coverage of the draft, in my opinion. Rich Eisen said, who was covering the draft, he goes, "There's Tony Khan in the war room with his dad." He goes, "In case you didn't notice, he's got the neck brace on because he took a pile driver last night on AEW television." So that's free advertising. He's mentioning it just off the cuff. I know he's a wrestling fan, but he's just mentioning it off the cuff, and the other announcers are talking about it. So I feel like he turned a real negative, which was a terrible show and a terrible spot and a terrible angle and a terrible story, into something where it's like, wow, I'm kind of intrigued. Why does this guy have a neck brace on the NFL draft? This guy's getting beat up in wrestling. So he turned, I think, a negative into a positive.
So, John, interestingly, I haven't been in a lot of fights, but I was once on a school trip, middle school trip, and somebody was giving me a hard time in the room. And he wasn't expecting it, and I punched him in the stomach, and he dropped like a rock, like because all the air went out of him. So
Right.
it wasn't like he was like, oh, like stay. He really like it really like it was like knocking the air out of a balloon, and then it just sort of like quickly dropping down to the floor. So maybe Khan had experienced or seen that before. But other things, in terms of the tech, and of course, like, when it's, I don't want to give them an excuse. You really have to like know. But I'm wondering if this crew hadn't worked the other shows that they had done in this venue, this semi-outdoor venue, right? The Khan's venue in Florida before. So maybe there's something like with the wind or what. Obviously, like if you're in the field, you should be able to figure that out.
Yep.
But and also the neck brace thing is fun. It's also like a throwback all the way to like Andy Kaufman, um,
Yep.
which of course, being a little bit younger, I didn't discover it at the time. But when Comedy Central would run those "I'm from Memphis" specials, like almost every day, several times a week, and like you catch like a little piece here and there. With the neck brace, and of course, like the Vince McMahon thing during trial and whatever.
Yep.
Like it's a fun throwback. It's like a very pro wrestling type of thing.
And think about it. You've got the neck brace on, right? You got to sell it because you took this horrific move on the show. So of course, keeping kayfabe, a day later, you'd still have the neck brace. You'd have a neck brace. You'd had the injury. So he sold it and he kept it on, which I liked. I thought that was good. And Pat McAfee show for some reason, of course, WWE. I mean, they were ripping Tony because they're like, oh, he had too much movement in his head and in his neck, like it didn't look right. He looked like he was faking it. But I thought that was a little too nitpicky of it. I just thought it was good that he had the neck brace on, just at all.
Yeah, and not to make light of this for people that actually need it, but in terms of visual comedy, and apologies, like if he had a halo, that would have been even better. Like that
Yeah.
Pitbull 2 halo when your friend Shane Douglas grabbed it and shook it. That was like, oh my God, like that was crazy.
That would be interesting, like to kind of copy that angle, see what happens. Interestingly enough, though, the crowd seemed to be kind of like into it, and then the locker room emptied, and his dad came out. It seemed like the crowd was into it live. So, I think it with the AEW fans, I think it went over well. I think.
Yeah, it's sort of like how could you not? It's something surprising. That doesn't necessarily validate it, meaning that like when people watch like Thunder Angles now or early days of NWA TNA, and like you see a match or an angle in isolation, it's sort of like that's fun. This was a cool time period, whatever. And for the most part, it is. But you just have to contextualize it in terms of like, did it make sense? How did it help business? Did it garner interest? What did they do as a follow up? What did they do before to really like understand? So next week we'll potentially tell a story.
We'll see where the rating is next week. That's always important, and I know Meltzer and a bunch of people who said it's not the week that happens; it's the next week and the week after. Like, let's see how it builds. They showed the Punk footage; it did over 800, yes, and then obviously people did not like that because the Collision did the worst attendance they've ever done for AEW. Then the rating the next week was 760. This week was 683. So obviously that was not good. So, obviously you got to change it up, do something else, and we'll see if this maybe goes in a different direction because they've been heading downward and fast.
Yeah, it might be, just getting, you can't keep like reversing course so much, but like finding a different path, a different way, like where almost like sort of, again, I'm not putting death knell or whatever, but like the later days of WCW, you could bring someone in, but if you don't know what to do with them, it's going to be like quickly eaten up, right? Like from what I understand and not watching week to week, like Sasha Banks, like it's not special anymore when she comes out. It doesn't garner interest. It's sort of like that. Like you have one time, and this is when WCW is running hot. Remember, like Bret Hart coming over, and people were like, "Whoa, what's he going to do?" And then it was like a whole. It took forever for him to get there, which might have been out of their control. But B, like it was just like awkward the introduction, I think, is the NWO in the ring with Canadian national anthem, and then he was a referee. So it's like you have to find a way to make this work. So maybe just like a different approach to things. To me, like the way I think about it is like get back to basics, which sometimes feels like a little bit more boring at the start, but like make things mean things, and you build up to something. And if you have like one or two angles that drive the show, people are like curious and they want to learn more, and that's how you sort of grow from there. I think one of the things that they have to be careful of is having too many belts that don't mean anything, um, and finding a way to to make everything, most things meaningful, than like so many different things happening at people, but not maximizing it.
So, what is going on with these two legendary venues that you wanted to talk about?
So Weston's Winter Gardens Pavilion hosts CWF. On Saturday, April 27th, CSF Pro Wrestling will return to the pavilion in Weston Supermare as the promotion hosts Saturday Night Slam at the iconic venue. The Winter Gardens Pavilions has hosted pro wrestling for decades, and this month's event will mark CS Pro Wrestling's 26th year of hosting events in Weston. And they had over 400 fans last time in this sold out venue. So just really impressive about that, being able to run so long. And this venue has, of course, a lot of names passed through different points in their career, but it's hosted David Bowie, Pink Floyd, and so on. CSF took over the wrestling events of the Gardens way back in 2006 and are still going strong. Previously, they had people like Mark Rollerball Rocco, Johnny Saint, and Kendo Nagasaki. The managers of the event have expressed their excitement about the return. They said, of all the venues we visit, the wonderful Winter Gardens up there is one of our favorites. Each time we visit, we receive a fantastic response from local fans and family. Over the years, we've brought some household names to Weston, including Chris Masters, MVP, the Nasty Boys, and Mr. Kennedy. This year, the occasion will be even bigger with the host of talent on the show, and we can't wait to be back. On the other side of the Atlantic and near the river, Fall River may give the Bank Street Armory to the historical board. Here's what that means. In the 3 months since the City Council voted down the sale of the Bank Street Armory for redevelopment into market rate housing, there's been some progress to move oversight to the Historical Commission to help restore the 1897 building. Mayor Coogan said his administration is using $35,000 left from a previous Community Preservation Act grant to shore up the building and avoid further damage. We're buttoning it up. We're going to secure the windows and putting drains up to make sure water is running away from the building. Sounds like it's in bad shape. VP Pereira, a vocal opponent of the sale, wants to work with the commission to acquire grants to fund repairs so the city can use the space for things like office space and cultural events. I'd like to preserve it. It's the last historic property that the city owns. Let's give the commission a shot. Let them apply for grants and see what they can come up with. Just sort of perspective on this building, this armory in Fall River, of course, has hosted pro wrestling throughout the years. It's always a shame. They've had talents like Snuka, Mr. Fuji, George the Animal Steel. So, Fall River, Massachusetts, you can imagine that, that time frame. But it's always a shame. I know that we've talked about on the news, right, the old Ag Hall. Sometimes I mix them up, those two venues in Pennsylvania that has run shows and conventions. Sometimes we hear like, oh, it's been sold and there won't be more pro wrestling, and then sort of like the Undertaker popping the fist out of the grave that he's that it's not done yet.
Now, what is going on with AGBA, the group holding?
So this is now, for all intents and purposes, Triller. As we've talked about, the stock went from a penny stock to the Triller announcement to it hit at one point $3 a share. If somebody knew how to play the market right, you could I mean, depending on how much money you put in, right? You could have quadrupled or more your earnings. You could do the math. Zach Arnold covered it well in terms of his concerns, and I have the same ones, even though you see the shares surging at certain points. The good news for Triller is that it appears that years-long effort to get access to stock market cash is finally here. The shaky news is that the savior is a penny stock that was trading as low as 34 cents a share a month ago. The SEC dreaded 30-day delisting notice to AGBA being under $1 for more than 30 consecutive trading days. Last week's announcement that Triller would merge with the Hong Kong-based AGBA on the NASDAQ was heralded as a financial lifeline to keep the lights on. The merger means Triller shareholders will get 80% of the stock. A key part of the transaction deals with restricted stock unit holders. When do those stock options vest? How long of a waiting period before selling? And other considerations. Trades cash. As this report at Music Business Worldwide notes, they have under $1 million in cash or cash equivalents. The company has been sued by multiple parties for allegedly failing to make payments. As the MWB report claims, there are supposedly millions of dollars in unpaid music royalties. HGBA is claiming that by combining forces, the new company is worth $4 billion. How a penny stock with a market cap of $182 million merging with a well-known company that only has $1 million in cash equals $4 billion? Your guess is as good as mine. What's at stake for fight fans, and also I'll say pro wrestling? Over the last decade, many fans have had some type of interaction with the Triller service. All of those independent and mid-major pay-per-view events around the world, Fight TV. AEW fans certainly know the value of Triller. When Max didn't stream the All-In event from Wembley, there was Fight. When recent changes arose with Bleacher Report, there was Fight. If you're an independent promoter or hardcore Fight fan, you've probably purchased an event or show through Fight. One of those promotions happens to be Bare Knuckle, which is owned by Triller. Feldman, the owner, claimed he had to refinance his mortgage in order to promote a major pay-per-view event. He claimed piracy made a big dent in pay-per-view. Since that pay-per-view event, Feldman has been aggressively networking with all kinds of power brokers, including Dana White. Bare Knuckle is poker chips to the middle of the table with a major event at the Peacock Theater in LA. The administrative costs to run such an event in the state of California are astronomical. The future of Bare Knuckle very much is dependent on the success of the new Triller merger with AGBA. Should that merger fail, who knows how things might play out in a bankruptcy court. Fight and Bare Knuckle are obviously assets that a buyer would be interested in. Would one of those buyers include TKO? Getting into bankruptcy would not be an ideal situation for all parties involved. That is why the AGBA story is such an interesting last-ditch effort to access cash. And yes, I am predicting some forthcoming complication. Triller's marketing campaign is that they are a competitor to TikTok. Well, we all know how that's played out. The regulatory environment is changing in America. As the New York Times report, congressional push to force the sale of TikTok to new owners faces legitimate and difficult legal hurdles. There are also political hurdles. With a higher level of security over TikTok, you would assume this is good for AGBA and Triller. Initially, the stock market seemed to believe so. The problem for Triller is that the Committee on Foreign Investment is wielding an unpredictable hand in regards to big business ties with companies associated with China. What happens if they decide to meddle in their business affairs? The hope amongst those who benefit the most is that we don't get to that point, but nobody can predict. What's the financial endgame of AGBA? If the proposed merger between Triller and AGBA goes smoothly, it won't be the same as a SPAC. Nonetheless, it's a risky undertaking. On paper, the idea is that Triller merging will allow the combined forces to access money it previously didn't have. Throw in a legislative ban on TikTok and hope can spring eternal. The biggest question is whether or not AGBA can sustain over a period of time a substantial increase in the price of the stock to encourage more investment, or at least keep the stock price high enough so that more stock shares can be issued on the market via stock dilution. The risk of stock dilution is that Wall Street investors hate it. Stocks can get punished for it big time. As we recently saw with Sophie, a mainstream upstart got somewhat punished by the market for issuing up to $700 million in convertible senior notes. The idea of raising liquidity in exchange for cash and stock did not go over well. Now imagine the impact of possible stock dilution. There will be plenty of insiders who hope that AGBA can survive long enough in order to sell shares. The question is whether that dream will come true. When you see incredible wild swings in volume trading, good or bad, you're at the mercy of the institutional players. As the old adage goes, somebody always knows something. We're right back to where AGBA was 1 year ago for the share price. So what does modern fight finance teach us? If you have a long enough memory, you might recognize a few different fights with exposure to capital markets. Elite, IFL, Bellator, New Japan. The International Fight League with its various franchises went national on my TV. In their debut, flatlining imagery and stretcher jobs. The promotion was the one that soon flatlined. Promoted by Gary Shaw, Elite XC was the precursor. That failed. Okay. And so on. We know those histories. What you'll notice with penny stocks in combat sports is that things proceed slowly for a while and then they change very, very fast in either direction. Trailer needs AGBA to retain value at a steady clip, at least enough time to bring in a new investment or extract value. The consequences for the promotions and the service you enjoy as a fight fan are substantial. So all this is to say that so many promotions in the pro wrestling landscape have become reliant on Fight and Fight Plus as a means of distribution, especially, of course, GCW. Even though the stock price is doing really well and it seems like more stability and access to cash for the merger, things could really like go away in a poof. Zach Arnold lends it out really well, and we could see like this ecosystem crumble. Where would people go if Fight goes away, right? You have these other services, but it's not to the same level. We had seen that to a different degree in the Flow, right? When Flow Slam was opened and then, it closed, where did people go? So it's really an important story to watch.
I feel like they've got so many different promotions on there that their success is kind of tied to a lot of promotions, not only wrestling world, but bare knuckle and other places as well.
It's sort of like, imagine ESPN taking a big bet in the late 80s, early 90s and failing. Where would all of these sports properties go for additional revenues? Yes, you have the regionals, which, that was a way of making money, local markets and so on, but you didn't have an equivalent to ESPN. And I think for the most part, for especially these independent promotions, you don't have an equivalent of Fight. Maybe somebody like DAZN would actually be smart to step in and acquire Fight. We're getting 10 steps ahead of ourselves. Fight and Trailer might be the most successful thing ever, but that would be somewhere where I'd see like DAZN is already dabbling in pro wrestling, so that would be a big opportunity for them.
All right, let's wrap this bad boy up and go to the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Lavie, what do you got going on?
Check out my long form articles and book reviews for wrestling books on LionCubJobSearch.com. Our growing LinkedIn group, The Business, which includes pro wrestling jobs. And if you want to interact with me and see the articles that I write or share in advance of the podcast, check me out on X, Lavie Lavie Marg. If you're listening to this on a podcast and you want to see us and also get an early drop, usually on the podcast, go to PW Ponderings. We're the official business podcast of PW Ponderings.com, but check out their YouTube page as well. And we are distributed by the Creative Control Network.
All right. Thank you, Lavie. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.